Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I am here to talk to you about my top 3 and bottom 3 reads of 2024 so far. Alright guys, so half of the year has come and gone already. I can't believe we are already here. This year seems to be flying by, yet at the same time I feel like January and February are so far in the distance. But that being said, we have read some really great books and some mediocre books so far this year, so I figured I would go ahead and talk about my top 3 as well as my bottom 3. As far as the top reads go, I did a video earlier this month where I looked at 1-star reviews for my 5-star reads so far this year. If you haven't seen that, I will go ahead and link that up above, and I gave you the opportunity to kind of guess which books you thought out of that list were gonna be in my top 3. So once I go through those, I would love to know if you guessed correctly, because honestly at the time that I filmed that video I did not know which books I was going to choose as my top 3. As far as my bottom 3 reads go, I have luckily not had any books under 3 stars this year. I have DNF'd a few books, but I'm not including these in my video. I usually do a video at the end of the year where I talk about the books I DNF. I say that as if last year wasn't the first time I did that, but that is where you will hear about those books. These are books that I completed and rated and just felt that they were a little bit lacking. But that being said, I didn't hate any of these books or feel that they were problematic or would advise against you picking up these books. So if you hear what I have to say about them and you're like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting to me, pick them up. No problem whatsoever. So there's not gonna be too much hate in this video, guys. Sorry. I know that content is always fun, but what can I say? I just know my reading taste well enough these days where I don't often read books that I dislike enough to give less than a 3-star, which I think is a good thing because it means I'm not wasting my time on books that I don't like. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into the list. I'm going to kind of go back and forth. We'll start with one of my least favorite books. That way we go ahead and end on my favorite books of the year so far. All right, so I honestly only own one of the books that I will be talking about in this video. Yes, that includes some of the books that I gave 5 stars. I do need to get around to purchasing them because I definitely need to be part of my library. But that being said, the first book that I want to talk about that goes along with my favorites, I'm gonna generally talk about it more as a series as a whole, and that is going to be the Perfect World manga by Ri Aruga. I did not read the entirety of the series here in 2024. In fact, I think I read just the last 4 volumes of it this year, and specifically I gave volumes 8 and 10 3 stars this year. But I want to go ahead and talk about the series as a whole because oftentimes when it comes to manga I don't remember too much about what happened in specific volumes, and I was left a little disappointed by this series overall. So this is a contemporary slice of life manga. I did go into it expecting kind of a romance manga. I would not want to categorize it as a romance, and maybe if you go into it not expecting that, you may enjoy it a little bit more. There's definitely a relationship in here, but when you think of romance, this is really more of a slice of life situation where we are following a young woman who is reacquainted with her high school crush, and he has since been in an accident that has caused a spinal cord injury, and he is now using a wheelchair full time. And throughout this series we watch as they start to both develop a relationship as well as be in a relationship and kind of navigate what it's like to be in this world as a disabled person and as a couple where one of the members is disabled. On the side, they meet a lot of other people who are wheelchair users, so we get a lot of different experiences for wheelchair users, whether it's people that are very young or people that are very experienced with wheelchairs, whether it's people that had an injury and will live their life as a wheelchair user, or if it's people that have a degenerate disease that will eventually kill them at a very young age. So it can be a rather hard-hitting story. I just struggled with it a lot. One, because of my expectations going into the story, and two, because of the pacing. It is very obvious that this author wanted to go into the story to talk about the experience of a disabled person, specifically someone who uses a wheelchair, and the pacing very much revolves around important events in someone's life, and that can mess with the pacing a little bit. For many of the early volumes, our characters are actually not even together because our disabled character is kind of struggling to accept the fact that they could be in a relationship with an able-bodied person, and our able-bodied person is struggling with the fact that a lot of people don't want her to go into this relationship because she would take on the role of a caregiver, and that's all that they would see her as. So a big chunk of the series kind of focuses on prejudice against people with disabilities and how they are perceived as a burden and an inconvenience to both individuals and society as a whole. And then once they do decide to be in a relationship, it shoots forward through marriage and looking into potentially having children, because the author has now focused on everything that has to go into considering going into a relationship, all the hurdles that come with going into a relationship with a disabled person, and now wants to focus on the hurdles that they face when they're trying to conceive with someone who has a spinal cord injury and is not able to have regular sexual interactions with them. So it was a bit awkwardly paced, and it kind of gave me a little bit of whiplash and made it a little bit more about the disabled experience rather than the relationship of our two characters, which is personally what I wanted. I will say there were definitely a lot of sweet moments in here. It does have good representation. It does bring up good points, but at the end of the day, I just was a little bit bored by it, and it didn't meet my expectations of what I wanted going into the series. Up next, going into one of my favorite books of the year. I just want to point out these are not in any sort of particular order. You can kind of mix them around how you want, but this book is not going to be a surprise to those who have watched my channel for a while, and that is Where There's Smoke by Cole McCade. This was, I want to say, the 6th book in the Criminal Intentions series, and this is the first one that I actually gave 5 stars, but I have been having a wonderful time with the series since the very beginning. It's just this volume had everything that I wanted in it. In the series, we are following Malcolm and Sanjay, and they are homicide detectives at the Baltimore Police Department, and Sanjay has recently transferred over to this department and been placed with Malcolm as his partner. Malcolm is actually about 10 years older than Sanjay and is a little reluctant to be his partner at first, one, because he's kind of a lone wolf, and two, because Sanjay is actually his superior despite being younger than him. But eventually the two of them find that they work really well together and also seem to be growing closer and closer together when it comes to their personal relationship. So this is a very slow burn romance between the two of them. There's some great representation in here. Sanjay is asexual, and I would say he's also on the autism spectrum, and he is also Korean. And then we have Malcolm, who is I want to say he's Jewish and Palestinian, maybe, and he is also bisexual. So there's some good representation. Pretty much all the side characters are queer as well. We have a non-binary character, we have a aromantic character as well. And what I really enjoyed about this specific volume is that in the other volumes, I sometimes was not 100% interested in the actual mystery of the week or murder of the week that they were trying to solve. I was primarily focused on the personal relationships between our characters, their past traumas, all that jazz. But in this book, not only did we have a lot of character development, not only did their relationship kind of take that next step, and we had that excellent smut scene, but the potential homicide in the story was so interesting. So in this book, there is not a body, there's just the potential for a body of a young woman who seems to have been attacked and kidnapped. So there are very high stakes where our characters are racing against the clock to see if they can save this young woman, and are kind of interacting with her family as well to kind of let them know where things are and if they can get any information from them. And obviously that is a very emotional and straining thing to go through, because you're dealing with a mother whose child has disappeared and left nothing but tons of blood behind. So our characters were definitely feeling emotionally and mentally strained throughout the story. They were kind of at their limits, and they were really relying on each other to kind of figure out if they can save this young woman. And I honestly had no idea which direction the story was gonna go. I was, of course, the whole time praying that this young woman was okay. I thought that the pacing was excellent, and I was rather satisfied with the way that the author decided to end this story. As always, I really enjoy Cole McCade's writing. I think his writing is so perfect for slightly darker romances where we have very soft and loving characters with sharp edges, and at the same time they are dealing with a lot of horrors through potential murders and assaults that are happening to the people within their community. So his writing does a really great job of bringing that all to life. And of course his characters are so lovable. I love Sanjay, I love Malcolm. I am so sad that I am approaching the end of this series. It will be really sad to say a goodbye to them, but for now I'm just going to continue to enjoy the ride. Moving on to my next least favorite book so far, once again rated 3 stars, and this is The Forest of a Thousand Teeth by Julia Dow. I listened to this as an audio book, and I used it for a prompt for a readathon. Otherwise I don't foresee myself having picked this up anytime soon, if like ever. So this is an East Asian inspired young adult fantasy, and I believe it is a loose retelling of a story known as The Evil Queen. And in a way it is a villain origin story, which I thought was intriguing because a villain origin story has worked really well for me in the past. Unfortunately, this story was bland. It was the definition of middle of the road. It was definition of your everyday YA fantasy. It just wasn't giving me much. It was giving me just enough for me to be like, okay, I'm not gonna DNF this story, but I never really got connected to the character. I definitely felt more connected to our character towards the end of the story when she started to kind of lean into her villain era characteristics, but before then I felt like she was kind of a wishy-washy character that I just couldn't really get behind. I also felt like a lot of the side characters, they were there and they played a part in the story, but I never felt overly connected to any of them, even her potential love interests, to be honest. So I never really cared too much about her relationships with other people except for her relationship with the Empress, and I definitely think that that was not explored enough in my opinion. So overall, I just really felt like the story was not giving enough, and at times it was just a little bit predictable and wasn't anything new, wasn't anything exciting. The writing was decent, the plot was decent, everything just kind of left me feeling uninspired, to be honest. And this is actually a duology, but I really felt like there was no reason for me to continue this series, so I went ahead and decided against reading the second book because the story didn't capture me enough for me to feel like I needed more of these characters. Up next, we have the one physical book that I actually own, and this is another one of my top books of the year so far, and that is going to be Moth by Lily Mayne. So I have been reading the Monstrous series for a while. This one is book 5. I've read up through book 6 so far, and I will say that this one has gone ahead and dethroned Soul Eater as my favorite book in this series. I've given quite a few books in this series, Soul Eater being book 1, Gloam and Seraph being books 4 and 6 as well. But this one, there was just something about it where I completely ate it up. So in this world, we are following a post-apocalyptic America. About 20 years before the start of the book, there was a rift between our world and the world of the monsters. And the monsters kind of came through. They were like, hey, look at all this free real estate, you know, all this space for us to roam and whatnot. And the military decided the best thing to do was to bomb the monsters into oblivion. And by doing so, they kind of bombed humanity into oblivion as well. And at this point, people either live in large walled cities or they have to join the military, which is very much in control and not always doing the best things for people, or they can become raiders living out in what is known as the wastelands, which is not under protection of the military. In fact, sometimes raiders get killed by the military, and also they are obviously out there with the monsters that roam the waste as well. This series, we follow a different couple in every book where a human falls in love with a monster, or in this case, a half monster. So Moth is the child of a human and a monster. So he is half and half, and he has never really belonged to either side. Both sides tend to, for the most period, very much hate each other because they're killing each other. They're essentially at war, and so most people don't really want anything to do with him. However, he does go around and take part in the black markets and kind of try to make a decent living for himself. And one of these days he shows up to a raider camp that we are familiar with in this series, and a ex-soldier, his friend, they show up to say that they have received a message from one of their members that he is alive and well but cannot return to the camp at this time. And so the camp has asked Moth, because he's familiar with traversing the wastelands, to see if they can return to this place where they met this other man, to see if they can go ahead and be like, hey, come home, we need you. And so he sets off with one of those ex-soldiers, and they start the long journey across the country. And at first they are very distant. Moth is like a grouchy teenager, and like he has so many walls up. He does not want anyone to get close. He kind of knows people don't like him. He's supposed to be a loner, but at the same time he wants to be loved. He wants someone to appreciate him as a person and to be attracted to him and his body, despite it being not a monster body and not a human body. And that is something Charlie can give him, because I'm pretty sure the character's name is Charlie. Oh my gosh, if I look like I'm getting distracted, my mom brought my kitten in and he is please don't mess up my screenshot by just like writing gibberish into it. we will deal with that later. Anyway, so he and Charlie are a little bit tense at the beginning because Charlie's like, hey, I'm not putting up with your snooty behavior, okay? We're gonna go on to this journey. We're gonna keep each other safe. We have to have each other's back. So I really need to be able to trust you, and you need to be able to trust me. Now my screen is black and I'm really nervous about what he did. Oh my God. Having a kitten is hard. Oh my God. He's just like, all he wants to do is step on this computer. Like literally has the entire bed, he's the entire floor, but no, he's just got to step on the computer. Oh my God. I think he's like, how do I get down? Here, let me put him down real quick. Say hello. Say I'm a troublemaker. Look up. Ta-da. All right, so eventually Charlie tells Moth, he's like, hey Moth, I have noticed you think I'm kind of attractive, and honestly I think you're pretty attractive as well. We're out here in the wastelands, we could die at any second, okay? Things are terrible, things suck. Why don't we have sex for funsies? And Moth is kind of like, I've never done any of this stuff before because no one has ever wanted me. And Charlie's like, well, I want you, so let's do this. And Moth is like, okay, let's do this. So it's kind of a friends with benefits kind of a situation until it obviously becomes more. And when I tell you, I think that this has the best smut scenes out of the entire series. The way I was salivating while reading these, they were well done. Like just watching Moth become more comfortable with himself and opening up to Charlie and just kind of realizing that there are people that care about him and that he cares about people, and that that's okay, that he doesn't have to be a loner, but no one really understands him the way that he wants to until Charlie, and just watching him going from this like grumpy emo teenager to this man who is realizing that there is more that he wants out of life and he's gonna go ahead and fight for that now, was incredible. I just love Moth so much. I'm so glad that he found someone. I think he just had a really hard childhood. He experienced some abuse at the hand of his parental figure, and his mother, I believe, died at a very young age, and he was always looked at with like disgust, and no one ever wanted anything to do with him. So he's my poor precious baby. And eventually he luckily got everything that he deserved, which is someone who really loves him for who he is. And also watching Charlie's kind of character development throughout the story, because he's technically ex-military, but he has been kind of like, should I stay out here in the waste? Should I return to the military? Because, you know, the military is kind of all that he's ever known, but the more he learns about the military, the more he knows it's not right. So we kind of watch him battling with that, but the more he gets to know Moth, the more he wants to stay out here with him. So really enjoy kind of getting to explore the wastelands, as well as a little bit into the walled cities as well with these two characters, and just having a wonderful time with this series. I think that Lily Main's a really great writer. She really does a great job with her characters, with the smut, and as well as the plot within the story. So yay. All right, moving on to my third and final least favorite of the year so far. I kind of went back and forth between a couple of books for this, and I finally decided on the one that I both didn't really enjoy and was rather disappointed by, and that is going to be The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This is an author I have definitely been excited to check out, and I still foresee myself giving them a second chance. After all, I gave this book 3 stars, so it's not as if I hated it. But this is a novella about a character who lives under the ocean. This society was created by the infants born of women thrown over slave ships during the transatlantic slave trade. And these people obviously hold a lot of trauma in their past, and because it makes it very hard to function and is very painful, what they usually do is they put all of their memories into one person, and this one person holds it, which is a very painful experience, and we are following the character who is doing that for their society. And once a year, I want to say, they go ahead and they share the memories with all of the people, because despite not wanting to suffer from the memories, people still always want to know where they come from. So for 24 hours, they get to go ahead and live with these memories in their head and kind of get that itch scratched, and then the person is supposed to take it back so that they can go back to their everyday lives. However, our person has decided that they can't do it anymore. So they pass over all their memories and then they flee into the ocean and kind of leave their people lost within these traumatic memories. And then we kind of follow them as they try to figure out what they need to do with their life, and as they worry about the consequences of their actions, which is a very intriguing concept. But I was honestly just bored with this story, and I don't know if it's because I listened to the audiobook, so I was never fully able to immerse myself into the story, or what, but I just felt like I was never fully sure what was going on or what the purpose of the things that were happening. It was above me. I don't know what to say. It was intellectually beyond my abilities, I think. And while I don't like a story to be like straightforward and just write everything out for me, I do like to figure things out on my own. I think that this story was just a little too convoluted for me, and I was just kind of scratching my head, and by the end I was like, yep, that's a book that I read. And I never do too well with novellas, so I knew that there was a risk that I didn't love this story, but it was still rather disappointing that I didn't like it more than I did. I will say that I could tell that River Solomon was a great storyteller and that they had really great writing, so I am excited to check out more of their work, maybe something a little bit longer, a little bit more fleshed out, something I have a little bit more time to sink into. Hello. Little baby. It's a little baby. Hmm? Yay. All right, and moving on to the final book, and one of my final favorite books of the year. We have a book that I actually just recently finished a few days before I'm filming this video. This video is not coming out until later this month, but due to some traveling that I'm doing, I'm filming it a little ahead of schedule. But that is To Catch a Firefly by Emmy Sanders, and this is a contemporary male-male romance. It is a friends to lovers situation featuring a neurodivergent character with select mutism, and I fell in love with this book from the very beginning. There are some books where you're not really sure if it's gonna be a 5-star until you finish the book, but this book I knew from the first chapter. I was like, yes, 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 I am going to fall in love with these characters. I'm going to fall in love with the writing. I'm going to fall in love with the plot. I don't even care if there is no plot. I am going to have a grand old time, because there is just something about the story that just instantly pulled me in. So this book is set in Nebraska, I want to say, or is it Nevada? It's one of the end places. And there is a lot of corn there. So it is a small town of mostly huskers, who are the corn people, and pulpers, who are the paper people. And we follow two characters, Ellis, who was born in this town and whose father up and left when he was rather young, and then Lucky, who moved to the town when they were 7, I want to say, or were they 9? When they were very young, when they were still in elementary school, and he came from Chicago. And the first day he meets Ellis, he's like, hey, let's be friends, but he also makes it known that he wants to leave this town when he gets older. That's his big goal. Lucky is so full of life. He just wants adventures. He wants to live on the edge. And Ellis, on the other hand, is very much in love with his community, even if they don't always treat him the best due to his select mutism. They kind of use some slurs against him every once in a while, some of them that they obviously should not be using, but he very much enjoys his life there. And especially after his mom gets diagnosed with MS, he decides that he needs to stay here. And Lucky starts to realize when he's relatively young that he is in love with his best friend, and so he is very reluctant to leave. But Ellis tells him it's okay to go, you need to go out and live your life. And that is exactly what Lucky does. He becomes a photographer for, I guess you could consider it almost like National Geographic. So he goes and he explores the world, taking photos, living his life and all that jazz. And then he starts to come home because he realizes that he really misses Ellis, and that no matter what great adventures he goes on, his first instinct is always to call Ellis and to tell him about it and to just hear his voice and to just know he's on the other line listening. And Ellis has also started to realize that he has feelings for Lucky, which he's very surprised by because he's never had any sexual desires or desires for a relationship. So I would definitely say that he's like demisexual, but at the same time, Lucky is already out living his life, and Ellis can hardly ask him to come back to the small town that he always wanted to escape to be with him. However, the two of them, of course, find a way, and this book brought me just so much joy. I never wanted to put it down. I just wanted to read more and more about these characters. I would say this is not an overly eventful book. I know I was reading some reviews and they were saying it was boring, and I was like, no, it's about the characters, and I love the characters so much. I thought that the two of them did a really great job communicating with each other when it was time to really sit down and communicate. And even though Ellis has his select mutism, he is relatively good about telling Lucky how he feels once they start those conversations and letting Lucky know his concerns, and Lucky, of course, respects those and acknowledges them and addresses them. So I really did enjoy this relationship so much. I just thought that it was so powerful. I felt like their love just transcended the human experience. Like, I feel like it was just the kind of romance that really sticks with you, where the characters were just soulmates. Like, I'm pretty sure these two are soulmates. I know that I often say like enemies to lovers is my vibe, and enemies to lovers is fine. It's fun, it really is. But I think at the end of the day, I really need to say that I do love a good friends to lovers situation, because there's just something about people having such a strong bond with each other and that just moving on to the next level that just feels so right. And this relationship just felt so right. So I really enjoyed the writing. I really enjoyed the characters, the side characters, and just watching these two people kind of form a life together that worked for them, that allowed both of them to continue to live their dreams, the life that they wanted, but also compromising so that they can go ahead and live a life together. So I really love this book. If you haven't read it, you got to. I will say that all three of the books that were on my favorites list were KU books. You can read all of these books on KU. So KU is killing it so far this year. All right, guys, hopefully my kitten doesn't eat my hair, even though he seems to really like to do that. So those are my least favorite and favorite books of the year so far. So far, I think this year has been, don't eat my earrings, has been going really great. I'm really happy with my reading so far. I would love to know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. And I would also love to know what your favorite and least favorite book of the year so far are. As always, guys, thank you so much for supporting my channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Say bye!